time isn't the biggest constraint, then what is?
I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I currently study comparative literature, philosophy and art history at the University of Hong Kong in my final year. In terms of a religious background, I am agnostic.
I'm from Italy and I'm half Italian, half Chinese. Because I grew up in Italy, I was raised Catholic, but as I grew up, I realized I was more atheist, so I'm not really a religious person. And I moved here to Hong Kong 3 years ago, and now I'm studying arts and marketing.
I'm 20 and I'm currently a medical student at Hong Kong U. And I was raised in a really local background and I used to be Christian. But when I moved and changed environment to a more international background, I became atheist. And yeah, I'm full Chinese.
I was born in India, but I was raised in Hong Kong. My parents believe in Hinduism, and as a result, I was also raised to be a Hindu. I don't have as strong of a connection to my faith as my parents do, but I still have some sort of a connection. And since I was raised in Hong Kong, I did have multiple views that I was exposed to. And currently, I am studying in HKU as a Year 2 FinTech student.
I'm a Malaysian Chinese studying in Hong Kong. I was born in Sweden and raised in the States for some time before permanently living in Malaysia. Religious-wise, I'm a Roman Catholic.
I'm Malaysian. Came back to Chinese U to teach anthropology, and I research medical anthropology, and I tutor also in philosophy. I'm an Anglican priest, but I belong to a very liberal school. Thank you.
I'm afraid of death. If you agree with this statement, sit on the left. If you disagree with this statement, sit on the right.
I can start. I'm sitting on this side, saying that I disagree with the statement that I'm afraid of death, and I think that's because I haven't fully internalized what death is, and I haven't come to terms. I haven't faced it myself. Although I have seen relatives pass away, none of them have been super close to me, and as a result of that, I've never been truly affected by it. So I think that's why I'm sitting here.
I'm scared of the consequences, and I know that if I'm actually put in a life and death situation, I would want to go to life. The most important one is just because I have a lot of people that care about me, and the consequence of my death is it will be very painful towards those people.
I think personally, I agree with how the consequences of your death might affect the people that love you dearly. And I'm also scared of that, but personally I chose this side because I know that death is inevitable, and I don't think it's something that we should fear, because it's kind of like the finale of life. It's kind of like what you want to work towards personally, which is to at the moment of your deathbed, you think back in your life and you think, I've done all I could and I've really enjoyed my life and I'm happy to die.
Yeah, I tend not to be afraid of death, because not only because of my age, I'm 68, but I've lived a full life, and I think most importantly, I had 2 bouts of cancer. I had leukemia, and then after several years, I recurred as bone cancer, and I've recovered from it. And so I've almost seen death, and to be honest, I've prepared for the day because of my 2 bouts of cancer. I was told if I had a 3rd bout, myself wait and die, and so I prepared everything. My wife is taken care of. I don't have any children, and I'm at peace with facing that.
I think for me personally, I think I completely agree with I think what you said about the journey. Like when I think about my life, it just feels like every day is the same, or like it's not going to end. But once the concept of death is brought up, it's like the realization of the reality of like my existence or my conscience is going to end one day, and I think that brings a bit of anxiety.
I think that I'm not scared of death, mostly because I'm very young, so you don't really put that into your perspective, because hopefully it's not gonna happen very soon. But I think overall the whole the action itself of passing away, I don't think is the scariest part. I can agree the scary part is maybe if you're ill, so like it's the whole process leading up to it. But even if you're ill, at the same time, death can also be a solution. So it can just be an easy way out, and you know that it's inevitable anyway. So you don't have to. It's not something that you can fight against. So you just have to accept it, and that will help you better to pass away peacefully.
I think, much too often people look at death as an end point, no more, no continuity, lost of everything. I tend to look at it in a different perspective. It's, if you have lived a full life, it's the high point. It's the point where you could say, I've done it, and I'm satisfied, and this is good, and I'm ready to go. Just so that number of years given to me becomes a rich experience rather than a waste. Yeah.
Again, I think going back to start, like the fact that I can't exactly comprehend or know. Like the concept of death is so overwhelming in the sense you just have no idea what it's going to be like. It'll be nothing you've experienced. No one has experienced it if you talk to them because they haven't died.
And that is why living a full life is so important. Every hour, every second, not wasted, and using it to the fullest.
Do you think time is the biggest constraint in life? If you agree with this statement, sit on the left. If you disagree with this statement, sit on the right.
I feel like my perception of time has changed, especially in the past year. Because before I didn't really care for like deadlines or like personal deadlines or achievements or bucket lists. But I guess with COVID starting and especially like how the situation was in Italy where I was at the time, right? Like how the lockdown started and I spent 3 months in my house. Like you realize in those days when you're basically doing nothing, how the day passes really fast. So like in a blink of an eye it was February and then it was finally May or June and you just realize I missed like a semester of university, for example, and I guess like that really put like a different perspective because if you don't know what you're doing, then time goes really, really fast, and then you realize so much time has passed and you haven't achieved anything. So I guess it just put me more in a rush for doing more things. Yeah.
Pose a question to this side, to my side. If time isn't the biggest constraint, then what is?
Because I felt like time is something we can't exactly control, but we can perhaps control a different way or affect the different way we experience time. That depends on what we do, what we at certain times ingest, at certain times what people we surround ourselves with, and unfortunately sometimes we're forced to stay in a room for 3 months, right? And yeah, I feel like it's more our ability or like how freely we can choose to experience our time more.
I couldn't agree more with what you said, and I think that's the reason I took this seat as well, because I feel it's easy for humans to unite ourselves and say that we have this common currency of time, but there's really more to that. The biggest constraint is in fact how you manage that time, and you can approach it from a student's mentality, like how productive you are, but also if you're born with like a disease which will a disease which will reduce your lifespan significantly, then it's how you make the best of it. And I think there are other constraints such as your mindset, your mentality, your approach, which I think are more significant.
Really know my explanation for why I chose this side. But then throughout the year, I realized that it's not about how many things that you achieve and do, but it's more about feeling content and feeling like you understand yourself and feeling like you're comfortable where you are and that you are confident in like everything that you've done, not in terms of because I've done that many things, because I think that's still determined by like the societal pressures, people around you, but more about like your own reflection on yourself and your life and what you want to do and how you want to, as you guys said, manage your time in your life. And I think perhaps like to answer your phone question of what else would be a bigger constraint, probably something to do with your environment, like that you can't control. That would affect how you think.
I agree with this precisely because if there's no end point, and this is what I've been saying, if there's no end point, then life becomes meaningless. The fact that you know that you are given only a specific number of years, and that would push you and motivate you to use every second. It's not so much the amount of time, but the quality of time, and how you value it.
One of the constraints that kind of supersedes time could be choice in terms of, because I think, as you said, the quality of time, it really depends on what we want to do. I think that's something we all said. And sometimes the very overly burdening feeling of not having much time is dependent on the choices we've made or commitments we want to do, or perhaps environmental factors, as you said, that doesn't allow us to have choices.
I want to have a legacy after my death, regardless of its scale. So if you agree with the statement, sit on the left. If you disagree with the statement, sit on the right.
Agree on the.
I mean, I personally do not really care for a legacy because, as I said before, like for death, I have a really realistic approach. So like once you die, there's nothing. So yes, you might want people to remember you, but like a legacy itself, I don't think I would really care for. Me personally, after you die, you should not care about what like people think about you. I don't like your reputation doesn't matter anymore.
I think it's more about the legacy of knowing that I've made an impact in the world and made it better. Not necessarily anything that's like tangible, or like an actual like actual memories of something, or like a business or anything. Or it could just be the fact that you've made someone feel better when they were going through their worst.
I think for me, I had a bit of trouble like choosing which side, and the reason for that was I felt, and this might not be the best way to think about it, right? I felt that to want to have a legacy is quite narcissistic in nature. So, no offense. And instead, like the way I want to think about it is, I just want to do valuable things when I'm alive, and as a byproduct of that, an unintended byproduct of that, is that you have a legacy after you die.
See, as a Christian, and also growing up in a family that's very, very pious, I was taught not to let my left hand know what my right hand is doing. And so that carries over to the point where, whatever good I've done, whatever money I've donated, whoever I've helped, I've never allowed people to know it. I've always done it anonymously. A legacy is much more to me as what I know, what I've done, and what I've achieved, and what I have done and left behind, so that others could benefit from it. Because of that, there'll be people who will benefit from the research that I've done, the results of that. But they do not need to know who I am, or who did it, or who found that, and who helped them.
The concept of having created like something creative, like a film, and then after I died, it's like, oh wow, this is directed by Colin Wu, or this was curated by this person, or again, even if they didn't know, or like, wow, if someone could see this with me post-mortem, I just thought that would be such a cool idea.
Like I was also thinking of examples of like bigger picture legacies, because there's a lot of people who want to spread their knowledge and want people to remember to profit from their knowledge and their teachings. But then we also have examples of like bad legacies. I'm gonna put it like in a very, like for example, there's like fascism, for example. The person who wanted to transmit the legacy of fascism is dead, but there's still people portraying this legacy. So like that's why personally, like this type of narcissism, as you defined it as, oh, I want people to remember what I taught, can be still harmful because like it's part of the past. Like when you die, you're not you should not affect the afterwards because you're not part of it anymore.
Would that be a double standard though? It seems like if it's good things, they can have a legacy, and bad things, in our own worldview, they can't have a legacy. And I feel like the whole, I guess, what you said about
The past not affecting the future?
Yeah, I think that's also
that's
very debatable.
Yeah.
I think well, it's a really multifaceted question because legacy is also like, what is it?
Yeah, exactly.
That goes into like a morality question, whether if it's good you should have it, if it's bad you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm more fearful of my own death than the death of those around me. If you agree with the statement, sit on the left. If you disagree with the statement, sit on the right.
Okay.
Disagrees here.
The reason I was quite quick to sit on this side was because I thought of this, applying the statement to my life right now. I know that two things are true, right? One thing, the most important person in the world for you is yourself. But secondly, the people that I'm immediately surrounded by right now, my closest friends, my closest family members, they're not in the immediate threat of dying. So I'm not fearful for them.
I agree with the fact that you should put your always yourself first. So like, I think I interpret it in a very different way. So because I'm putting myself first, then I think more of how like the people around me dying is gonna affect me. So because if you die, you die. So there's no repercussion or consequences to you personally. So like in a selfish, I guess, in a selfish way, you don't care anymore. But then if you're still alive and you see all these your loved ones dying around you, that's gonna affect you worse.
I do think that like the death of a person would definitely affect the people around them. But since death is so inevitable, and I think I'm less fearful of my own death than death of those around me because I have control over how I feel about death and how I feel about my own life. And I think at this moment I'm at a pretty good place. But whereas the people around me, especially the people I care about, I don't have that much control over like how they feel about themselves. And yeah, that's why I'm more fearful for how they might feel. Yeah.
To me, the question is what's going to happen in the future. My generation mucked up everything. We made a mess of it. And yet I have the privilege to die when the mess hasn't gotten out of hand yet. So my greatest fear is for all of you. What's going to happen to all of you? The environment is going to deteriorate. The earth is going to, be so polluted. There's wars and rumors of wars every day. The Americans don't want the Chinese to become as powerful as they are. And they're willing to mess everything up. They're going everywhere stirring shit in every country, in every area of the world. And that's my biggest worry for all of you. And it's all because of my generation of greedy, money-grubbing, dominating bullies. Whether it's politically or economically or even ideologically. And so that's my biggest fear. I've got off without being punished, for the mistakes my generation have made. But you guys are paying for the mistakes I've made, and that's my biggest worry for all of you.
But will you be considering their well-being, or will you be considering their death? I think those are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the ideas you guys both mentioned were, be concerned about their livelihood, rather than the brevity of their life.
I think more also in terms of how they will die. Will they die as peaceful as me, or will they suffer so much? Even before they die, and the cruelty of it.
I took a really selfish approach to this because it's like it depends on what type of death. If dying a peaceful one, then I'll be happy for those around me to die a peaceful death. Especially I'll be happy for myself if I die a peaceful one. But the reason I'm saying on this side is because it's the same thing with selfishness. It's like if someone around me is dying of something, let's say cancer, the more I think about it, it's more of like it's a selfish me that I want to keep that person dead. It's because it's going to hurt me. That's why I'm fearful for that person's death. So I took the more selfish approach. Yeah.
That was the final question of our interview, and we hope that you guys have enjoyed the discussion as much as I did, certainly. We know that the nature of our subject means that no conclusion, can really be reached because there's so many different perspectives. However, we do hope that through this process, our discussion is able to help us appreciate the complexity and diversity of death.
and to put this in the context of a clinician, inevitably we will meet patients of different backgrounds, different religious upbringings, and all of these other factors that we've explored that we have shown that really changes the way that we perceive the notion of death. And I think what is most important in this situation is that we're able to be empathetic and try our best to put ourselves into the shoes of our patients, to allow us to understand why they have certain perspectives, why the people around them, their family members, their children, their relatives, may see their deaths in certain ways and may have certain emotional burdens. And I believe that by doing so, will we only be effective clinicians, will we only be able to be empathetic ones, and will we only be able to be humanized ones. Yeah.